Everybody loves the idea of bringing technology and digital tools to the job site if it makes our lives easier. But those digital tools don't swing a hammer. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the tools that Builders FirstSource has provided us to make our lives a whole lot easier during the construction of this home. But sometimes the old school way is just the best way to do it. Today's video sponsored by Builders FirstSource. Let's get going.
Altitude Adjustment, a Build Original series, is brought to you by Builders FirstSource, Delta Millworks, Huber Engineered Woods, Hella, and Sharkbite.
This is a highly complex plan, and with Builders FirstSource ReadyFrame and digital tools, we were able to go vertical before we actually went vertical. ReadyFrame allows us to go in and insert all of our MEPs, our plumbing, our electrical, our fire sprinklers, our HVAC, and identify conflicts before we find them on the job site. This helps solve hundreds of issues before they ever even happen. We anticipate this is going to help us save time and money by not having to do a bunch of rework and a bunch of changes on the job site. Builders FirstSource ReadyFrame is pre-cut lumber material that we're using on the main floor system of Altitude Adjustment. I could not be more excited to utilize this and to integrate it into our process because I think this is going to speed up our process significantly. Working with the Builders FirstSource team, we were able to render the entire house ahead of time, create amazing photos and walkthroughs of the entire project so the homeowners can really see and feel what this house is going to look like before it ever gets built. That has actually helped us identify areas of the home that the homeowner thought were going to look or feel different. We're able to make those changes within the software and solve those problems before we ever get to the job site. This is a perfect example of the Build Show motto, know better, build better. By integrating these tools, we're going to create a much better process for us and our team and crank through this framing much quicker than we would otherwise. Go check out Builders FirstSource ReadyFrame and all the digital tools available on bldr.com. So even with all the digital tools in the world, why are we framing this basement traditionally? I'm going to walk you through a few things that helped us make our decision for this house, how we decided to frame it, and how we're integrating some of those Builders FirstSource digital tools on this particular job. So as you've seen, we've started framing the basement down here. This project, we decided really early on that we were going to use traditional framing methods for the lower level. Now, a few of the reasons that kind of triggered that decision are, first off, this slab. So we all know how inconsistent concrete can be. We need to make sure things slope. Concrete is not always perfectly level and flat. So trying to come up with the inconsistency if this concrete is slightly lower on one side versus the other, when we're pre-cutting all of the lumber with ReadyFrame, that can make it a little bit challenging. We also had a few little random changes with some recessed basement shower floors that would have accounted for some taller walls in locations that it just made more sense to us and our team to traditionally frame this basement. And then we're going to be using ReadyFrame from the floor structure all the way up. The slope is probably like the number one thing that made us decide to traditionally frame it. These are those other areas. So when we have our recessed shower floors, the concrete crew, when they came through and formed this, actually formed it a little funky. So this side of it, the wall actually drops down into the recess. On this side, the wall is sitting up on the edge. So some of those inconsistencies would have caused a bit of a challenge with the ReadyFrame just because this wall would have been cut differently. We would have had some more waste from having to get different material to use it. So those are just little things that made our decision a lot easier to try and frame this basement traditionally. Now, a few of the other challenges that we have with this particular job site, this whole level is radiant heat. So we're hydronic heating this basement floor. When you have those hydronic tubes that are running through this slab, we now have to be extremely careful with the hilties that we're putting through all of our plates into the concrete. So if we traditionally had, say, a 3-inch long hilty that we're going to shoot through the bottom plate into the concrete, we can't do that here. Because our radiant heat tubing is so close to the top, we have to make sure that we're paying attention to what type of fasteners we're using to put these bottom plates onto this concrete. So along with just some traditional adhesive, we'll be using some shorter nails, and that allows us to put these plates down and secure them without damaging the tubes. Because when you hit those radiant heat tubes, it is not a second chance. That starts leaking immediately and we have an issue. And on this house, it's a problem because all of this basement floor is going to be polished concrete when we're done. We don't have a floor surface like a hardwood or a carpet or a tile to cover up mistakes in the concrete. So if we end up having to chisel this stuff open to fix a pipe that got burst, we're now going to see that patch in the polished concrete floor. So not a big fan of that. So that kind of led us in this direction. Now, our crew started over here yesterday afternoon and just cranked through a couple hours of framing. And we actually have a few things that we're going to change that I want to talk to you about. So the first is going to be our window sills. So historically in the past, we've framed these level and the windows have been installed and we haven't had an issue. But with all the things that we're seeing come out on social media and with the Build Show Network, we're starting to understand that there are better ways to do these things that can help us prevent water damage in the future. So we're actually going to come through. We only have 3 windows framed now, but we'll reframe the sills on these windows. And we're going to just put a little 2-degree slope on those sills. That way, in the event that water gets into that window opening, it's going to naturally run its way out. So that's actually new for our framing crew. It's not something we've traditionally integrated, but we're going to be doing it on this house. So in this lower level where the framers are framing everything with their traditional framing methods, they will actually have to come through and cut these so that we can slope them. But when we get to our main floor, when we're framing with ready frame, those will come pre-cut for us. So we don't have to worry about that slope and we just nail everything together. So the rest of this basement is going to start moving through framing next week. And there is a lot of little minor details that we have to pay attention to and we really have to look at before we start putting them up. That's one of the cool things about digital tools. The digital tools provide clarity, so we can go through and see how all of this house is going to be framed and built before it even exists. That's the cool part about them putting together everything in a model. So we can try and find or fix some of the issues with how the house was designed by the architect. There's always going to be areas that don't work when you start framing them, or areas that need to do something different or make more sense for a certain type of finish. The digital tools part of this allows us to see the whole house built in a 3D model and actually walk through and understand where each one of these studs goes, where each one of our blocking is, how thick and tall our headers are, how many king studs or trimmers do we have, so that then we can adjust where light switches or outlets or things are. This is something we're used to kind of adjusting as we do construction. But now with the digital tools from Builders FirstSource, we don't have to. We can try and tackle all that stuff ahead of time, cut back on rework, cut back on changes, and really just try and do it right and perfect the first time. Not to say that we're not going to run into issues, because there's always something where an owner wants to add an outlet or a light switch or something specific. So we just want to be prepared for that. And I think that's probably the thing I'm most excited about, is that we were able to tackle over 100 conflicts, whether that be with wiring, electrical, plumbing, radon, fire sprinkler system. We were able to handle over 100 conflicts before we even started construction. That is 100 items that we would have had to try and figure out how to fix here on the job site. We're used to doing that. It's not abnormal. This is not something that I'm saying you'll never have to do again. But why wouldn't you utilize some of those digital tools if it was going to help your job site move a whole lot smoother and a whole lot easier? So our basement level is going to get finished. We'll finish traditionally framing all the way through. From this section all the way up through the roof is going to be done by the ready frame. So all of our main floor joists will be pre-cut for us and delivered. We have a really interesting floor system on this house because we're doing the hydronic tubing on the main floor as well. As we talk about how all of this is going to kind of come together, we now have to account for 3/4 subfloor, 1.5 inches of gypcrete with our radiant heat, another 3/4 subfloor because we want to put traditional hardwood floors on top of that. So we need a place to be able to nail that hardwood floor down without, again, puncturing the tubes. So we talk about not wanting to damage these tubes down here in the lower level, but we also have to think about it upstairs. So we're going through and adjusting this stuff and making it all work digitally before we get it out here to the job site. A couple other things I want to show you that have changed on this job site since the last time you guys were around. We actually have our swimming pool that has been completely framed. So if you've seen these really cool digital renderings of this job site, the swimming pool, which is actually a spool, so it is a pool-sized hot tub, sits over the top of all of our retaining wall structure out here and has this insane infinity edge that drops off the back side of the house overlooking the lake. So the team has actually got this all formed up and ready to start putting all the gunite in. We also have started coring all of the holes that we need to get all of our pool equipment in this back room. Now, because we're gonna have to try and use a conveyor belt to backfill that pool space, we're trying to get that framed and handled and ready to gunite before we get those main floor walls on. It's just gonna make it easier for us to reach, easier for us to get there, and try and kind of combine the pool company with the framing contractor to make sure things are going smoothly. We've also got all of our boulder retaining walls, I would say 90% done. The crew is actually delivering the boulders for the driveway as we speak. So we'll talk a little bit in some of the next episodes about that conduit that's running through the driveway, how we're getting the gas lines and the power lines over to where they need to be when there are so many areas that we can't disturb on this property. So just think about that as you're starting to consider using ReadyFrame for your job site. The digital tools provide clarity. The on-site construction makes things happen. So we need to find a way to make those two things work together. And I want to tell you guys a little story about how we used the digital tools on this job site and how that process went. So now we're going to go back in the office and you're going to see a meeting between myself and Justin Pratt from the digital tools team at Builders FirstSource. I'm going to walk you through this process of how we chose to do the digital tools and the ReadyFrame here on this job site. We're going to show you some of those conflicts that we found and ways that we're altering the plan to make it work for this particular house. And you guys will get a little sneak peek inside of what ReadyFrame actually is. And when we talk about Builders FirstSource digital tools, we don't mean just ReadyFrame. We're talking about a full plan design. We're talking about renderings, both inside and out. Digital 3D walkthroughs of the house itself. So let's go back to the Stephanie Dailey construction offices, and I want you guys to meet Justin Pratt while we talk a little bit more about the digital tools on this job site, and we'll come back out here to wrap up the video. We are so excited, you guys. As you've seen in previous episodes, our footings and foundations are in. We are headed towards doing our sub rough, and right after that comes our framing.
We're ready, yeah.
This is a really cool process that we've taken on this particular build. So we have this plan set, and the plan set is over 70 pages of information.
Very complex custom home, right?
It is. And you know, the interesting thing is, although there's 70 pages of information, it doesn't necessarily mean that all of it is working together.
No, and you know, I think historically, at least in my career, I don't know about yours, you know, we've had fragmented plan sets, right? And we got architectural, and we got structural, and then we got Builders FirstSource, you know, creating component plans, and then we have our poor mechanical, electrical, and plumbing guys that have no idea what those look like in a combined structural. And so, you know, I think what's exciting about the process is that we can begin to know better, build better, not to take Matt's words, but right, that's what it is. It's really looking at the pre-con process in a 3D integrated model with those combined what would have been fragmented plan sets, and then sitting down and really studying it to avoid conflict.
So one of the things that we've done here on altitude adjustment is taken advantage of the Builders FirstSource digital tools. And we provide Builders FirstSource with our 71-page PDF plan set. And where do you guys take it from there?
So we take your plan set and then we model it into Revit, right? We just get kind of the base wall structures, if you will. We kind of look at, you know, the modeling of that, and then we'll take that and, you know, like what we like to call the Z-axis. And so we then raise that, but then the next part of that is, okay, how do we then take it to what we do at Builders FirstSource? We sell you lumber and we sell you components. And so we then take and feed that off into our interior design teams. They begin to model the structure, model the trusses, and then we pull that in together to that same kind of Revit model that has the placeholder, if you will, and then we're able to show the skeleton of the house. That's kind of step one of it, and you know, we're looking to structurally solve that. And then after we get that kind of where it is with concerning the engineering, then we'll sit down with you, and in the case of this job, you gave us all your mechanical, electrical, plumbing, sprinkler, and some other designs, and then we put that into there and modeled it to get that first collision report.
Yeah, that collision report is really key to this whole process, because traditionally we're running into those collisions on the job site during construction, finding delays. But with the tools that Builders FirstSource has provided us, they can actually input all of those MEPs into this model. They can run a collision report in the software and tell us these are the places that you're going to find issues, or these are the places that just flat out aren't going to work. So I know at one point when we did our collision report, Justin, we had an area in the lower level family room where there was a bunch, I think over 20 collisions.
31. Yeah.
31 collisions in one single room. The biggest factor of those collisions was two big steel beams that were running across the entire basement, holding up the floor system. And all of our pipes, whether it was plumbing, mechanical, fire sprinklers,
All conflicted.
everything was stopping because we had to stop on either side of those steel beams. So our choice really at that point was, okay, do we drop the whole ceiling in that basement, or do we just drop those two beams with our structural engineer now before we've actually poured the foundations or framed the house, and solve this issue by just lowering those two beams and letting everything run up overhead?
Yep.
But had we done that on site, or had we found that issue on site, we would have been long past being able to drop those two steel beams, and the only option would have been to drop that whole ceiling.
Correct.
So I think it's really great that the way your tools kind of come together allow us to find solutions for the problems ahead of time, to not only make it an easier answer to fix all the problems, but also aesthetically for the homeowners, a much better looking space. Instead of lowering that whole basement ceiling, we're able to add two decorative beams and make it look fantastic. And we still keep those high ceilings in the lower level.
Yeah, and we still keep what the intended architecture was, right? And we keep the customer happy. And, you know, I know it's always fun when we're building for a customer and they walk in and something's just not the way they thought it would be. And that's always a fun conversation for us as builders.
I hope you guys enjoyed that. I know sometimes it can be a little boring to watch people in the office, but I found it super interesting to understand how Builders FirstSource can actually help us solve problems here on the job site before they ever even happen. So stay tuned, because on the next episode of Altitude Adjustment, we're gonna be setting our ready frame main floor walls. We may even be craning some of our trusses up on this job site. And I'm gonna give you a little peek into the complexity of this roof and the way that we're having to actually build the roof and put it together, which is a totally different process than I've ever done in the past. And it's all for some very specific finished details. So I'm glad you guys watched episode 4 of Altitude Adjustment, and stay tuned because episode 5 is coming soon. We'll see you guys next time on Altitude Adjustment.